My sister's campaign of jealousy began subtly, a series of small cruelties disguised as sibling rivalry. She feigned a diabetes diagnosis simply because she resented the attention my genuine condition required from our parents. Chloe, who was 5 years my senior, seemed to interpret my type 1 diabetes not as a medical struggle, but as a personal insult to her. Her sabotage was calculated. She would strategically hide my glucose meter just before meals, causing delays and frustration. My emergency juice boxes, essential for treating low blood sugar, would mysteriously vanish from my bag. She would then weave tales for our parents, painting me as a manipulator who was exaggerating my symptoms for personal gain. The most terrifying incident occurred when I was 10. Right before a long family road trip, she discarded my entire supply of insulin, an act of malice that resulted in me being rushed to the ICU in a state of diabetic ketoacidosis. In school, she spread rumors that I was faking my illness to receive special treatment and avoid gym class. Throughout all this, my parents advised patience, attributing her behavior to simple jealousy over the medical attention I received. They couldn't fathom the depths her resentment could reach, the dangerous obsession it would become. When Chloe turned 18, the next phase of her deception began. During a family dinner, she casually mentioned experiencing dizziness and shakiness between meals. With practiced nonchalance, she produced one of my spare glucose meters, scrolled through its history, and claimed that several of the outlier blood sugar readings were hers, from times she had supposedly borrowed it. Our mother, ever anxious, immediately booked an appointment with my endocrinologist. Simultaneously, Chloe began a social media blitz, informing her entire circle of friends that a diabetes diagnosis was imminent. The comprehensive blood tests, of course, came back showing her levels were perfectly normal, but Chloe was prepared. She argued that the doctors had overlooked a case of reactive hypoglycemia. Within a week, she was demanding the same strict meal plan and accommodations that I required, meticulously timing her fabricated symptoms to align with my actual insulin injection schedule. Chloe's feigned hypoglycemic episodes grew increasingly theatrical. It didn't matter that achieving dangerously low blood sugar levels is impossible without injecting insulin, something she was not doing. Logic had no place in her performance. She would collapse dramatically in the aisles of department stores, her body racked with contrived shudders, demanding juice from concerned onlookers. She had studied my real symptoms with the focus of an understudy and perfected her imitation. My genuine hand tremors, my confusion from plummeting glucose, the slurring of my speech when my levels dropped too fast, she replicated them all. She timed her false crises for moments of maximum impact, even faking a grand mal seizure-like event at my own birthday party, convulsing on the living room floor until a guest frantically shoved cake into her mouth. When the paramedics arrived, they found her blood sugar was perfectly normal, but she insisted their meter must be faulty. Our parents spent thousands of dollars on specialists and tests, all of which found nothing physically wrong with her. Chloe immersed herself in online diabetes support forums, spreading misinformation to actual diabetics, and then concocted a bizarre theory that her low blood sugars were caused by passive exposure to my insulin. She demanded we use separate refrigerators. She would wake our parents at 3:00 a.m., claiming she was experiencing a life-threatening low, forcing them to cook for her while I quietly managed my own genuine nocturnal blood sugar fluctuations. Because unlike her, I wasn't performing for an audience. The elaborate lie finally imploded on Thanksgiving. Chloe was in the midst of one of her customary dramatic lows when our cousin, visiting from out of state, casually mentioned seeing her devouring a large bag of candy in her bedroom just an hour earlier. Chloe froze mid-tremor. Our aunt, a registered nurse, immediately took Chloe's glucose meter and tested her blood on the spot. The reading was 95, a perfectly healthy and normal number. A thick silence fell over the room as everyone stared at her. The shaking instantly ceased. She tried to claim the candy was a treatment for an earlier low, but our aunt, unrelenting, tested her again 10 minutes later. Still 95. No diabetic's blood sugar would remain that stable after consuming a large amount of sugar. That evening, our parents searched her room and discovered her diary, which contained a detailed chronicle of her deception. She had been faking for over a year, researching every nuance of the disease to make her act believable. They confronted her and gave her an ultimatum. She had 30 days to find a new place to live. Through her tears, she accused them of choosing their damaged child over their healthy one. But for the first time, her emotional manipulation failed. But Chloe was far from finished. The next morning, I was jolted awake by the insistent beeping of my insulin pump, signaling an empty reservoir, an impossibility since I had just filled it the night before. A cold dread washed over me. All of my backup insulin pens were gone from the refrigerator. My emergency glucagon kit was missing. Even the secret stash I kept hidden in my bedroom had vanished. I found Chloe in the kitchen, calmly holding my entire life-saving medication supply over the open sink. "If I can't have diabetes," she said, her voice chillingly steady, "then neither can you." She had already flushed half of it down the drain, thousands of dollars of insulin gone in a flash. She held the remaining vials over the garbage disposal. I had at most 6 hours before my blood sugar would rise to dangerously high levels. The pharmacies were all closed for the long holiday weekend and wouldn't reopen for 3 days. The nearest hospital was a 2-hour drive away. My parents had left early for Black Friday shopping and weren't answering their phones. Without insulin, I would slip into diabetic ketoacidosis within hours, my blood turning acidic as my body literally began to digest itself to survive. "Here's what's going to happen," Chloe explained, her finger hovering over the disposal's switch. "You are going to tell Mom and Dad that you've been coaching me to fake it the whole time, that you taught me how because you were lonely and needed someone to share the attention with. You'll admit you helped me stage all those episodes." "Either that," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "or I destroy the rest of this insulin and you get to find out what a real diabetic emergency feels like." My blood sugar was already climbing. I could feel the initial, insidious symptoms: a profound thirst, a persistent need to urinate, and a faint nausea that I knew would soon escalate into violent vomiting. Without insulin, I could be in a coma before my parents even returned home. I could die right here in this kitchen, with Chloe as my sole witness. She smiled, a truly cruel expression, as she saw the mental calculations flicker across my face, estimating how much time I had left. "Choose quickly," she whispered, gesturing with the vials toward the sink. Your sugar is already on the rise. How high can it go before your organs start to shut down? I stared at the vials in her hand, my mind racing through impossible scenarios. The garbage disposal buzzed menacingly beneath them, a mechanical monster ready to consume my only chance of survival. My throat was already parched, a sure sign my blood sugar was climbing past 200. "Chloe, please," I begged, but she just shook her head. Wrong answer. She dropped one more vial into the disposal and flipped the switch. The horrific grinding sound made me lunge forward, but she held up the remaining insulin like a shield. "That's one more down. You have maybe 4 hours left now, not 6. Want to try again?" My hands started to tremble, not from low blood sugar this time, but from a potent cocktail of adrenaline and rising glucose. I backed away slowly, desperately trying to think. The landline phone was in the living room. My cell phone was charging upstairs. Even if I could reach one, who would I call? My parents weren't answering. The pharmacy was closed. An ambulance would take at least 30 minutes to arrive, and Chloe would have destroyed everything long before they got here. "I can see you calculating," Chloe taunted, blocking the kitchen doorway. "There is no way out of this. Just tell them what I want you to say, and I'll give you back your insulin. It's a simple trade. Your life for a little lie." I glanced at the small kitchen window, wondering if I could possibly fit through it. Chloe must have followed my gaze because she calmly picked up a large kitchen knife from the butcher block. "Don't even think about it. I'm not going to stab you or anything so cliché. But I will use this to puncture every single one of these vials if you take one step out of this room." The nausea was intensifying. My body had started the dangerous process of breaking down fat for energy, releasing the toxic ketones that would eventually poison my bloodstream. I could taste a distinct metallic tang in my mouth. "You know what the funny part is?" Chloe asked, setting the knife down within easy reach. "I actually learned so much about diabetes from watching you. I know exactly what's happening to your body right now. Your cells are starving because they can't access the glucose in your blood without insulin. Your liver is dumping even more sugar into your system, trying to give you energy, but it's just making everything 10 times worse." She was right. My blood sugar was probably nearing 300 by now. The thirst was becoming unbearable. I desperately wanted water, but I couldn't move without risking the rest of my insulin. "In about an hour, you'll start vomiting," she continued casually. "Then comes the confusion, the weakness. Your breathing will get fast and shallow as your body tries to blow off the excess acid building up. I've seen you in DKA before. Remember that time I threw your insulin away before our trip?" The memory of that trauma ignited a spark of anger through the growing fog in my head. That almost killed me, but it didn't. Mom and Dad had rushed me to the hospital, held my hand, and stayed by my bedside for days. And where was Chloe? She was sent to stay with Aunt Margaret as if she were the victim. She gripped the remaining vials tighter. This time they'll have to choose, their precious sick child or their healthy one who just wanted to be seen. I braced my hands against the counter, trying to steady myself. The room was starting to feel oppressively warm. My skin felt dry and flushed, a classic sign of severe high blood sugar. "What happens when I'm in a coma?" I asked, my voice raspy. "When they find me unconscious on this floor, do you really think they'll believe I coached you after you've literally murdered me? You're being dramatic. You won't die. You'll just get sick enough that when I find you and save you with this insulin, you'll be grateful enough to say anything I want," she sneered. "I've thought this through. I'll be the hero who found her poor diabetic sister in crisis and saved the day. For once, I'll be the one taking care of you, not the other way around. My vision was beginning to blur at the edges. Not enough to be incapacitating, but enough to know that my time was rapidly running out. I needed those vials, but Chloe had positioned herself perfectly. The disposal was directly behind her, the knife was within arm's reach, and her eyes were tracking my every move. "Want some water?" she asked mockingly. "Your mouth must be so dry right now. What are you at, 350, 400? How high does your meter even read before it just says error?" I didn't answer. I was trying to remember if there was any other insulin hidden anywhere in the house. A forgotten pen in a jacket pocket, perhaps. But Chloe had been meticulous. She must have searched everywhere while I was asleep. "You know what I hated the most," Chloe continued, her voice filled with a venom that had been brewing for years. "The way everyone always asked about you first. How's your sister doing? Is her blood sugar okay? Does she need anything? As if I didn't even exist except in relation to your disease." It was profoundly disturbing to realize Chloe had observed my physical state so closely, as if she were an actor rehearsing a role. She had memorized the specific tremors, the patterns of my speech. That level of dedication to a lie made me wonder what else was simmering in her mind besides jealousy. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the counter tighter. And the special meals, the carb counting, the constant finger pricks. Everything revolved around keeping you alive, while I was just supposed to be grateful that I was healthy. She laughed, a bitter, cruel sound. "Do you have any idea how invisible that makes a person feel? To watch your parents panic over every number on your meter while your straight A's on a report card meant nothing." I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but my energy was rapidly depleting. The ketones were building up faster now. My breathing was becoming labored. "That's why I had to do it," she explained, her voice rising. "I had to make them feel what it was like to worry about me for a change, to rush me to appointments, to check on me in the middle of the night, to put my needs first. But it was all a lie," I managed to croak. "So what? The attention was real. The concern was real. For a little while I mattered just as much as you." She held the vials out again, a final offer. "And now I'm going to matter more. Because when you tell them you helped me, they'll finally see that you're not the perfect little sick child they thought you were. You're just as capable of manipulation as anyone else." My legs were growing weak. I needed to sit down, but I couldn't show her that weakness. Not yet. "The thing is," Chloe went on, a note of pride in her voice, "I actually got pretty good at faking the lows. The shaking, the confusion, the way your eyes go all unfocused. I practiced in the mirror for hours, but you know what? I could never fake this." She gestured at me. "The way your skin gets that weird, dry flush, the fruity nail polish remover smell on your breath, the way you keep swallowing because your mouth is a desert, that's real diabetes. That's what's going to kill you if you don't agree to my terms." I could feel my heart pounding, struggling to pump the thickening, acidic blood through my veins. The insulin in her hand was my only hope, but I couldn't give her what she wanted. If I told our parents I helped her fake her illness, they would never trust me again. Every real symptom I ever had would be scrutinized. Every future emergency would be second-guessed. "Tick-tock," Chloe sang softly. "How high can you go? 500, 600. I've seen your meter error out at 600 before, remember? You were so sick you couldn't even stand." The memory made me sway. That had been one of the worst days of my life, and now I was hurtling back toward it. Only this time the cure was right in front of me, held hostage by my own sister. "You're sweating," she observed. "That's a new one." Usually you get all dry and flushed. Must be the adrenaline fighting with the high blood sugar. Your body doesn't know whether to go into panic mode or shutdown mode. She was right. I was torn between the primal fight-or-flight instinct and the overwhelming lethargy of DKA. My muscles felt weak and yet tense, coiled and ready to spring if I saw an opening. "I'll make it easy for you," Chloe said, her voice softening into a deceptive coo. Just nod your head yes, and I'll give you 1 vial. Enough to get you through until you can properly agree to my full terms." Otherwise, she shifted her hand back toward the disposal. The grinding sound from before echoed in my mind. Thousands of dollars of life-saving medicine gone in seconds. I thought of all the diabetics in the world who had to ration their insulin because they couldn't afford it, and here was my sister, trashing it out of pure spite. "You're thinking too hard," she chided. "This isn't a logic puzzle, it's a simple choice. Your life or your reputation. Which one matters more?" Everything was starting to feel distant, as if I were watching this scene from outside my own body. This was a bad sign. Severe DKA could lead to confusion, delirium, and even hallucinations. I needed to act before I lost the ability to think rationally at all. "1 nod," Chloe urged, her voice insistent. "That's all it takes. Just move your head down and up and this whole nightmare is over." But I knew it wouldn't be over. Even if I complied and told our parents the lie she wanted, Chloe would hold this over me forever. Every time she wanted something, she would threaten to reveal the truth. Or worse, she'd do this again. I would be living my entire life at her mercy, never knowing when she might decide to steal my insulin and hold my life in her hands again. "You're running out of time," she said, her voice sharp again. "I can see it in your eyes. They're getting that glassy look. How much longer until you can't even understand what I'm saying?" The kitchen felt like it was slowly spinning. I tried to focus on her face, but it kept swimming in and out of focus. My breathing was audibly faster now, my body desperately trying to expel the excess acid from my blood. "This is what you put Mom and Dad through every time you have a crisis," Chloe said. "This fear, this helplessness. Except they can't just fix it by nodding their heads. They have to watch you suffer and hope the insulin works in time." I wanted to tell her I never meant to scare them, that it was never a choice, but my tongue felt thick and clumsy. The words wouldn't form correctly. "Last chance," she said, holding up the vials. "Nod now or I flush the rest." I weighed my options, fighting through the thickening fog in my mind. The kitchen clock read 8:47 a.m. My parents wouldn't be back from their shopping spree until noon at the earliest. 3 more hours. My blood sugar had to be well over 400 by now, judging by the symptoms. The metallic taste was stronger with every swallow. Chloe saw me glance at the clock and her smile widened. She moved the vials closer to the disposal, letting them clink against the metal rim. The sound made my stomach clench. She held each vial, each one representing a day of my life, as if they were nothing more than trinkets. My legs buckled slightly. I caught myself on the counter, but Chloe saw the weakness. She leaned in, observing my deteriorating condition with a detached, clinical interest. Her research had served her well. She knew exactly what was happening inside my body. The need for water was now an all-consuming agony. My tongue felt stuck to the roof of my mouth. I tried to wet my lips, but there was no saliva left. Chloe saw this too. She walked to the cupboard, took out a glass, and filled it with ice-cold water from the tap. She took a long, slow sip, maintaining eye contact with me the entire time. I made a decision. Lunging was no longer an option. My reflexes were too slow, my muscles already too weakened by dehydration, but I could still think for now. I gave a single, slight nod, just enough for her to see. Chloe's eyes lit up with triumph. She set the water glass down and picked up a single vial, examining it like a trophy. Then she shook her head, a small, cruel laugh escaping her lips. The vial went back with the others. A nod, she said, wasn't enough. She wanted to hear me practice the story first. Every detail had to be perfect. How I supposedly taught her to fake the symptoms, how we planned it together, how I helped her research diabetes to make her performance more believable. She wanted me to rehearse it until it sounded natural. My vision swam. The kitchen tiles under my feet seemed to ripple like water. I gripped the counter harder, my fingernails digging into the laminate. The effort to remain standing was becoming monumental. My body was cannibalizing itself, converting muscle and fat into fuel it couldn't use. Chloe pulled out her phone and started recording. She wanted video proof of my confession, evidence that I was lucid and speaking of my own free will. She propped the phone on the counter, adjusting the angle to frame both of us. I opened my mouth to speak, but only a dry croak emerged. My throat was completely parched. Chloe sighed dramatically and slid the glass of water across the counter. I snatched it desperately, gulping down the entire glass. The relief was momentary. Within seconds, the thirst returned, even more intense than before. "Start talking," she commanded. I began to stammer my way through her fabricated story, my words slurring together. The mental fog was getting worse. Simple sentences were becoming complex puzzles. Chloe grew impatient with my performance. She made me start over twice, each time threatening the insulin when I faltered. The nausea hit me like a physical blow. I doubled over, dry heaving into the sink. Nothing came up but bitter bile. My stomach had been empty since dinner last night. Chloe stepped back in disgust but kept the camera rolling. She narrated my symptoms for her video, documenting my decline like a detached scientist. When the heaving subsided, I collapsed against the counter, my legs shaking uncontrollably, not the trained shaking of hypoglycemia, but the profound weakness of a body shutting down. I slid down to the floor, my back against the cabinets. The cool tile felt good against my burning skin. Chloe crouched down to my level, keeping the insulin vials in view. We weren't done, she reminded me. The confession needed to be detailed, convincing. But coherent thought was becoming an impossible task. Words floated away before I could grasp them. She grew frustrated with my faltering speech. She stood and paced the kitchen, muttering about the timing. She needed me to be lucid enough to confess, but sick enough to be grateful. It was a narrowing window. She checked her phone, calculating when our parents might return. I tried to push myself up, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. The room spun violently. I squeezed my eyes shut, but that only made the vertigo worse. My breathing was now rapid and shallow, my body's desperate attempt to expel the accumulating acid through my lungs. Each breath felt like it wasn't enough. Chloe recognized the breathing pattern, nodding with grim understanding. She'd researched this, too, Kussmaul respirations. "Deep, labored breathing," she recited gleefully. "That means your acid levels are nearing critical." She estimated I had maybe an hour before I lost consciousness. The attempt at a confession resumed. She coached me through the words, but my responses became increasingly nonsensical. Frustration contorted her face. Her perfect plan required my cooperation, but my body was failing faster than she'd anticipated. She switched tactics. She grabbed a notepad from a drawer and wrote out the confession herself. All I had to do, she said, was copy it in my own handwriting. She shoved the pen into my hand, but my fingers were too shaky to hold it steady. The pen clattered to the floor. My vision tunneled. Black spots danced at the edges. Chloe's transformation from jealous sister to amateur toxicologist was quite the career shift. Studying symptoms as if she were prepping for med school instead of simple blackmail. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear them, but they multiplied. Chloe's face dissolved into a blurry shape. Her voice sounded far away, as if she were speaking from another room. She slapped my cheek lightly, trying to get my attention. The sensation felt strange, disconnected from my body. She was losing her window. If I passed out before confessing, she'd lose all her leverage. She would have to give me the insulin or risk me actually dying, which would ruin everything. Another wave of nausea washed over me. This time, my stomach had something to expel. The water I'd drunk earlier came back up, scorching my throat. Chloe jumped back, cursing. She grabbed a wad of paper towels and threw them at me in disgust. The smell only made the nausea worse. She announced a new plan. If I couldn't speak or write, she'd settle for a video of me nodding along as she recited the story. Simple yes or no answers to her questions. She repositioned the phone and started filming again, but even nodding was becoming difficult. The muscles in my neck felt weak, unable to properly support my head. It lolled to one side. Chloe grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at the camera. Her touch felt searing against my clammy skin. The interrogation began. "Did you help me fake diabetes?" A faint nod. "Did you teach me about the symptoms?" Another nod. But my movements were so slight, so uncertain, that even Chloe could see they wouldn't convince anyone. She needed me more coherent. She made a decision. She opened one of the vials and drew a minuscule amount of insulin into a syringe. Not enough to save me, just enough to temporarily stabilize me. She would administer tiny doses, keeping me lucid but still dependent. Chemical control. The needle pricked my arm. I tried to pull away, but I didn't have the strength. Then a sound made us both freeze. A car door slamming outside. Chloe scrambled to the window, peering through the blinds. It was Mrs. Callahan, our elderly neighbor, getting her morning paper. Chloe waited until Mrs. Callahan was back inside, but the interruption had rattled her. She hadn't factored in the possibility of anyone else noticing something was wrong. The neighborhood was usually quiet, but it was a holiday weekend, and everyone was home. She turned back to me to find I had slumped further down the cabinets. My breathing was more labored now, each inhalation a conscious effort. The insulin in her hand was salvation, but she hesitated. If she gave me some, she would cede a small amount of control. Instead, she tried another tactic. She began listing all the times I had received attention for my diabetes, the hospital stays, the concerned teachers, the special accommodations. She recited them like a list of crimes, arguing that she was entitled to her turn, pretending to have the same condition. Her words washed over me. I caught fragments about fairness, about being seen, about years of being invisible. But comprehension required energy I didn't have. My body was conserving resources for basic survival. The doorbell rang. The sound was so unexpected it made us both jump. Chloe's eyes widened in panic. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the kitchen window, I could see a delivery truck. The driver was at our front door, holding a package, ringing the bell again. Chloe had to answer or risk arousing suspicion. She quickly stuffed the insulin vials into her pocket and brandished the knife at me, a silent threat to stay quiet. Then she composed herself and went to the front door. I heard muffled conversation. The driver needed a signature. Chloe's voice sounded unnaturally cheerful as she thanked him for working on the holiday. The door closed. Her footsteps returned, quick and agitated. She found me crawling toward the landline phone in the living room. I had only made it about 3 feet. My arms were shaking with the effort. She grabbed my ankle and dragged me back into the kitchen. The motion made my vision white out for a moment. Her earlier calm was gone, replaced by a frantic anger. The interruption had shown her just how fragile her plan was. Anyone could show up. Our parents could come home early. A neighbor could notice something was wrong. She needed to end this now. She pulled out the remaining vials and lined them up on the counter. One by one, she assigned them a grievance. This one is for the birthday party you ruined. This one is for the family vacation that became all about your medical needs. This one is for every time Mom checked on you in the middle of the night instead of me. The disposal word to life. She held the first vial over it, watching my face. But I couldn't focus on her anymore. The room had taken on a dreamlike quality. Nothing felt real except for the burning in my veins and the desperate, all-consuming need for air. She dropped the vial. The grinding sound lasted for a few seconds, thousands of dollars in medication destroyed. She picked up the next one and then the next. Each act of destruction was punctuated by another grievance, another time she felt slighted. Soon only 2 vials were left. My body began to convulse, muscles cramping from dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. The sharp pain cut through the mental fog for a moment. Chloe watched with clinical interest. This was a symptom she hadn't seen in her research. Real pain, it seemed, was different from a performance. She knelt beside me again, holding the last 2 vials. Her offer had changed. She no longer needed a full confession. All she wanted now was my agreement to stay silent about what she had done, to let her tell whatever story she wanted. In exchange, I would get enough insulin to live. I tried to process her words, but they scattered like smoke. My brain was starving for the glucose it couldn't access. Neural pathways were misfiring. Reality was fracturing into disconnected moments. Chloe's face, the vials, the knife, the ticking clock. She grabbed my shoulders and shook me. My head lolled uselessly. She was losing me, and she knew it. Her perfectly timed plan was unraveling. She hadn't accounted for how quickly DKA could progress, how total the body's collapse could be. Another sound. My cell phone ringing from upstairs. My mom's ringtone. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I saw a flicker of genuine fear in Chloe's eyes. If our parents were trying to call, they might be on their way home. She made a desperate choice. She drew up a full dose of insulin from one of the remaining vials. Not a tiny, controlling amount like before, but a real, therapeutic dose. She would give me this shot, stabilize me, and then force the agreement once I was coherent. The needle entered my arm, the cool liquid of the insulin entering my dying tissues. It would take time to work, maybe 20 minutes before I felt any real change. Chloe sat back to wait, holding onto the very last vial as her final piece of insurance. But she had miscalculated again. The doorbell rang once more. This time, the voice calling through the door was familiar. "Girls, is everything okay in there?" It was Mrs. Callahan. I saw the delivery driver leave in a hurry, and I noticed your parents' car was gone. Just wanted to make sure you two weren't all alone and scared." Chloe froze. Mrs. Callahan wasn't just any neighbor. She was a persistent, kind-hearted woman who baked cookies and kept a watchful eye on the entire street. She wouldn't be easily dismissed. Her voice came through the door again. "I brought over some of my leftover Thanksgiving pie." I tried to call out, but all I could manage was a pathetic whimper. Chloe clamped her hand over my mouth, her palms slick with nervous sweat. Mrs. Callahan knocked again, this time more forcefully. "I'm getting worried, girls. I might have to call your parents." That threat spurred Chloe into action. She couldn't have Mrs. Callahan calling our parents, telling them to come home. She stood up, smoothed her hair, and went to the door. Her voice trembled slightly as she explained that we were fine, we had just overslept. Mrs. Callahan was not convinced. She asked to see me specifically, saying she knew about my diabetes and got worried when she didn't see me out and about like usual. Chloe tried to make excuses, but Mrs. Callahan's tone grew more insistent. The conversation dragged on. I could hear the suspicion creeping into our neighbor's voice. Chloe was talking too fast, over-explaining. The insulin was beginning to take effect, clearing some of the fog from my mind. I needed to make a sound, any sound. I knocked over the glass of water. It shattered on the tile floor. The noise was unmistakable. "What was that?" Mrs. Callahan's voice sharpened. Chloe claimed I just dropped something in the kitchen, that everything was fine. But Mrs. Callahan had raised 3 kids. She knew the sound of something being wrong. "If you don't open this door and let me see her, Chloe, I'm calling 911, she said, her voice firm. The threat was real. Mrs. Callahan didn't make idle threats. Chloe came back into the kitchen, frantic. Her plan was in ruins. She couldn't let Mrs. Callahan call for help, but she couldn't let her see me in this state. She grabbed the last vial of insulin and held it up as a bargaining chip. "You get one chance," she hissed. "You tell Mrs. Callahan you're fine, just feeling sick from something you ate. Make her go away. If you say anything else, I will smash this last vial and be gone before help ever gets here. You'll be left here, dying, trying to explain everything." The insulin was working slowly. My thoughts were less fragmented, but my body was still incredibly weak. From the front door, Mrs. Callahan announced she was going to use the spare key our parents had given her for emergencies years ago. Chloe hauled me to my feet, supporting most of my weight. We stumbled to the front door together. She whispered final threats in my ear. One wrong word, and the last vial was gone. She would claim I destroyed my own insulin in a fit of despair. The door opened a crack. Mrs. Callahan's worried face appeared in the opening. Her eyes immediately locked on mine, taking in my pallid skin, my labored breathing, my obvious distress. Her expression hardened with certainty. I opened my mouth. The words that came out surprised everyone, including me. "Mrs. Callahan," I said, my voice weak but clear. "Do you still have any of that special tea from your garden, the one that's good for nausea?" Mrs. Callahan's eyes narrowed. She had known me since I was 5. She knew I hated tea, especially her bitter herbal brews, but she played along instantly. "I do, dear. I'll go get some right now. I'll be back in 5 minutes." Chloe started to close the door, relieved, but Mrs. Callahan stuck her foot in the way. She looked directly at me. "Have you checked your blood sugar recently?" A simple question, but it was loaded with meaning. She recognized the signs of a diabetic crisis. Mrs. Callahan showing up with a pie and sleuthing skills is like watching someone's grandma turn into Sherlock Holmes. She recognizes a fake "I'm fine" voice from 3 blocks away. I nodded, trying to play along, but I let my hand move to my pocket where I always kept my glucose meter. The gesture was small but deliberate. The pocket was empty, no meter. Mrs. Callahan's expression shifted. She understood. "I'll go get that tea," she said loudly, "and I'll just give your parents a call to let them know you're not feeling well." Chloe started to protest, but Mrs. Callahan was already walking away, moving much faster than her 70 years would suggest. She knew something was desperately wrong. Chloe slammed the door shut. Her calculated cruelty had been replaced by pure rage. Everything was falling apart. She had minutes at most before Mrs. Callahan called 911 or our parents, probably both. The game was over. She dragged me back into the kitchen, shoving me against the counter. The last vial came out of her pocket. She held it over the disposal one final time. If she was going down, she was taking me with her. Mutual destruction over defeat. But the insulin was working better now. My mind was clear enough for strategy. "If you destroy that," I said, my voice gaining strength, "you'll have to explain why I'm dead. No story is going to cover that. You'll go to prison. Real prison, not just getting kicked out of the house." She hesitated. I pressed my advantage, words flowing more easily now. "Or you give me the insulin, and I'll tell everyone I accidentally destroyed my supply. A stupid mistake I made when I was half asleep. You can back up the story. Be the hero who helps me through it. Mom and Dad will forgive your past lies if you save me now." The offer hung in the air between us. Chloe's mind was racing. Outside, we could hear Mrs. Callahan's voice, likely on the phone. Time was up. It was either total ruin or a chance at salvaging something. Then we heard it. The distant wail of sirens, faint but growing steadily louder. Mrs. Callahan hadn't wasted a second. Help was coming. Chloe's window for decision-making was closing with every passing moment. She looked at the vial, then at me, then toward the door. She made her choice. The vial flew across the room, smashing against the far wall. Shards of glass and precious insulin sprayed across the floor. The last remnant of my salvation, shattered in a final, hateful act of spite. Chloe smiled, a cold, empty smile. If she couldn't win, neither of us would. But I smiled back. Because during our struggle, while her attention was on Mrs. Callahan, I had done something she hadn't noticed. The syringe she'd used on me earlier, the one with the partial dose, had rolled under the counter. As she dragged me to the door, I had palmed it. There was still insulin inside. Not much, maybe 2 units, but enough to keep me going until help arrived. I had tucked it into my waistband and waited. As the sirens grew louder, I pulled it out and injected the last of it. Chloe's face went white. She hadn't destroyed everything after all. Her final act of cruelty was a failure. She made a break for the back door, but it was too late. Red and blue lights were already flashing through the windows. The address had been given. Mrs. Callahan let the paramedics in through the front door with her spare key. They found me on the kitchen floor, conscious but weak, surrounded by shattered glass and destroyed medical supplies. Chloe stood frozen by the back door, trapped between flight and consequence. The next few minutes were a blur of activity, paramedics checking my vitals, starting an IV, administering emergency dextrose. Police officers arrived, their expressions grim as they took in the scene. Mrs. Callahan recounted what she had seen and heard. Chloe tried to spin a tale of a terrible accident, but her stories crumbled under the slightest scrutiny. Slowly, my blood sugar levels began to normalize. The immediate danger had passed, but I would still need to be hospitalized for observation. As they loaded me onto a gurney, I heard Chloe telling a detective that I had destroyed my own insulin in a fit of rage. But the evidence told a different story. The knife she had threatened me with was still on the counter. The video she had taken on her phone documented my deteriorating state and her demands. The wreckage in the kitchen, with shards of glass covered in insulin residue, painted a clear picture of what had transpired. Our parents arrived just as the ambulance was preparing to leave. The look on my mother's face shifted from confusion to horror as an officer explained what they had found. My father stood silently, the full weight of how badly they had misjudged the situation crashing down on him. They had fed Chloe's jealousy until it had become a monster that had almost killed me. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. I watched the IV fluid drip steadily into my arm, each drop a tiny measure of the insulin my body desperately needed. The paramedics had stabilized me in the ambulance, but the doctors wanted me under observation for at least 24 hours. My blood sugar charts showed the wild swings of the last several hours, a stark graph of how close I had come to a diabetic coma. My mother sat in the chair beside my bed, her face puffy from crying. She had been apologizing nonstop since we arrived, a frantic litany of regret that I was too exhausted to respond to. My father paced by the window, pausing every so often to stare down at the parking lot below. They had not spoken Chloe's name since the police took her away for questioning. A nurse came in to check my vitals, her movements efficient and practiced. She adjusted the rate of the insulin drip based on my latest glucose reading, then left us alone in the quiet again. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors filled the space where conversation should have been. My throat was still raw from vomiting, and every muscle ached from the severe dehydration. Mrs. Callahan appeared in the doorway, holding a small potted plant. She had changed out of her morning robe and into proper clothes, but her face still showed the strain of the morning's events. My mother stood to hug her, and a fresh wave of tears began. They whispered quietly by the door, and I feigned sleep, unable to handle any more emotion. A detective arrived an hour later. He was younger than I expected, with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He pulled up a chair and asked if I felt well enough to give a formal statement. My mother started to protest, but I just nodded. The story needed to be told while the details were still sharp in my mind. I walked him through everything, from discovering my empty insulin pump to Chloe's final act of destruction. He took meticulous notes, pausing occasionally to ask for clarification. When I told him about the video Chloe had recorded on her phone, he made a specific note. That evidence, he said, would be crucial. The detective explained what would happen next. Chloe was facing charges of reckless endangerment and felony destruction of property. The value of the insulin alone made it a serious crime, compounded by the intentional withholding of life-saving medication. She was facing real consequences. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I looked at my parents, at their devastated faces, and nodded again. After he left, the silence in the room felt heavier than before. My father finally stopped pacing and sat down in the other chair. He reached for my hand and squeezed it gently, his calloused fingers trembling slightly. My mother sat on the edge of my bed, careful not to disturb the IV line. They started talking then, about finding Chloe's diary months ago and dismissing its contents as teenage melodrama, about the red flags they had ignored, choosing to believe her performances over confronting an ugly truth, about all the ways they had failed both of their daughters. Their words came in a jumbled rush, punctuated by sobs and long, aching pauses. The next visitor was a hospital social worker, an older woman with gray hair in a no-nonsense bun. She asked about my home environment, whether I felt safe returning there. The question felt absurd, but I understood it was protocol. She left behind a stack of pamphlets about family therapy and support groups for families dealing with medical abuse. My endocrinologist, Dr. Patel, came on her evening rounds. She had been my doctor since I was first diagnosed, and the sight of her familiar face was an unexpected comfort. She reviewed my chart, adjusting my insulin protocol to compensate for the trauma my body had endured. The stress, she explained, could throw my blood sugar control off for weeks, requiring more vigilant monitoring. Night fell outside the hospital window. The cafeteria had long since closed, but my father found a bank of vending machines on another floor. He returned with an armful of snacks, desperate to do anything useful. I managed a few crackers, my stomach still roiling from the day's ordeal. My mother's phone rang incessantly. Relatives from out of town had heard something was wrong. She stepped into the hallway to take the calls, her voice muffled through the closed door. I could hear snippets. Chloe charges, don't know what's going to happen. She seemed to shrink a little with each conversation. The night nurse was older, all business. She checked my blood sugar every 2 hours, pricking my finger with practiced efficiency. The numbers were slowly stabilizing, my body gradually finding its way back to a familiar rhythm. She brought me extra blankets without me having to ask, understanding the bone-deep chill that comes after severe DKA. I slept in fits and starts between the blood sugar checks. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Chloe holding the vials over the disposal, the grinding sound echoing in my dreams. I would wake up with a gasp, certain my insulin pump was beeping empty again. My mother would squeeze my hand, a silent reminder of where I was. The morning brought a new round of doctors and conversations about discharge planning. A psychiatrist was consulted, a standard procedure after what they termed a traumatic event. She asked me gentle questions about my mental state, probing for signs of post-traumatic stress. I answered honestly about the nightmares, the new anxiety around my insulin supply, the feeling of panic that hadn't yet subsided. Physical therapy was next. The severe dehydration had left me weaker than I expected. The therapist helped me walk the hospital corridors, slowly rebuilding my strength. My legs trembled with each step, the muscles protesting their ordeal. It was normal, she assured me. Healing would take time. A pharmacist delivered my new insulin supply directly to my room. He went over each vial with me, confirming the prescription and the expiration dates. My mother watched anxiously as I inspected each one, her hand hovering near the bag as if she could protect it with proximity alone. My father asked about buying a lockbox for storage at home. It makes me wonder what Chloe is telling herself right now in that holding cell, while her family is picking up the pieces of her mess. The fact she just ran when the sirens sounded shows how little this whole operation was planned beyond the initial act of cruelty. Discharge planning began in earnest after lunch. The case manager discussed follow-up appointments, emergency protocols, and safety planning. She explained that Chloe would not be allowed near me once she was released on bail, that a restraining order was already being processed. The words felt strange, clinical, as if we were discussing a stranger and not my sister. Mrs. Callahan returned that afternoon with homemade soup. She'd been cooking all morning, she said, needing to do something with her hands. She sat with my mother while I sipped the broth, the two women finding a quiet comfort in their shared vigil. Before she left, she pressed a spare key into my mother's hand, insisting she keep it for any and all emergencies. The insurance coordinator arrived with a mountain of paperwork. The destroyed insulin would be covered under an emergency replacement clause in our policy. She walked us through the forms, explaining coverage for the hospital stay and follow-up care. My father asked about coverage for therapy, his voice carefully neutral. My regular insulin pump needed to be replaced after the trauma. The diabetes educator brought a new one, walking me through the setup process step by step. My hands shook as I primed the tubing muscle memory fighting with fresh trauma. She was patient, letting me take each step in my own time. The evening brought more visitors. My aunt arrived from 2 states away, having driven all day after my mother's frantic call. She hugged me carefully, mindful of the IV, before turning on my parents. I could hear their hushed, angry whispers in the hallway, accusations of enabling Chloe, of ignoring the warning signs. The night shift began again. Different nurses, same routine of blood sugar checks and vital signs. I slept more deeply this time, exhaustion finally winning out over anxiety. The nightmares were still there, but they were less vivid, my brain beginning to process the trauma in smaller, more manageable pieces. The second morning brought the final discharge papers. Dr. Patel made one last check, declaring me stable enough to go home. She adjusted my insulin ratios again, factoring in the stress hormones still coursing through my system. She scheduled follow-up appointments for the following week, wanting to monitor my recovery closely. The discharge nurse went through a meticulous checklist, medications confirmed, follow-up appointments scheduled, emergency contact information updated. She had me demonstrate drawing up insulin and checking my blood sugar. Standard procedure, but it was suddenly imbued with a new weight. My mother watched my every move as if memorizing the steps. My father had brought clean clothes from home. It felt strange to get dressed after 2 days in a hospital gown. My jeans felt loose, the dehydration having stripped me of water weight. The simple act of tying my shoes left me breathless, a reminder of what my body had endured. The wheelchair ride to the exit was mandatory hospital policy, but I felt a new vulnerability as we left the safety of the hospital walls. My father pulled the car around while my mother gathered our accumulated belongings, flowers from relatives, get-well cards from neighbors who had heard the news, a stack of unread pamphlets on family counseling. The drive home was silent, except for the low hum of the radio. I sat in the back seat, watching familiar streets roll by. Everything looked the same, but it felt different, as if I was returning to a foreign country. My mother kept twisting around to check on me, her seatbelt straining with each movement. Our house was exactly as we had left it 3 days ago. The Black Friday sales flyer still sat on the kitchen counter. Chloe's coffee mug was unwashed in the sink. The normalcy of it felt obscene after everything that had happened. My father immediately began gathering Chloe's things from the common areas, packing them into boxes. I paused at the threshold of the kitchen, unable to step inside. The broken glass had been swept away and the insulin residue mopped up, but I could still see it all. The counter where I had braced myself, the sink where I had been sick, the spot on the floor where I had collapsed. My mother gently guided me to the living room instead. The lockbox was delivered that afternoon. My father installed it immediately in my bedroom closet, complete with a combination lock for added security. We packed my insulin supplies inside, counting each vial twice. He told me the combination, making me practice opening it several times. My mother wrote it down and hid the slip of paper in her jewelry box. My bedroom felt like both a sanctuary and a prison. Everything was just as I had left it, but the ghost of Chloe's presence lingered. I found one of my old glucose meters in my desk drawer, one she must have missed in her sweep. The discovery sent a tremor through me that didn't stop until my mother held me. No one felt like cooking, so we ordered takeout. We ate in the living room, avoiding the dining room table where so many family dramas had played out. The food tasted like ash, but I ate, knowing my blood sugar needed stability. My father kept checking the nutrition information online, calculating carbs with a new, frantic intensity. The doorbell rang after dark. We all froze, the sound now a source of anxiety. It was just another neighbor, dropping off a casserole, offering support. My mother accepted it graciously, while my father and I stayed hidden in the living room. The familiar rituals of suburban kindness felt alien to our new reality. Bedtime brought new fears. I checked my insulin supply in the lockbox 3 times before I could even think about sleeping. My mother offered to stay in my room, but I said no. I needed to face this on my own, to start rebuilding my own sense of safety. She compromised by leaving both our bedroom doors open, promising to listen for any sign of distress. Sleep came in fragments. I woke every few hours to check my blood sugar, a ritual now tinged with paranoia. The numbers were fine, but I rechecked them anyway. The insulin pump hummed softly on my nightstand, its familiar sound both a comfort and a trigger. The morning came, and my mother was already in the kitchen. She had spent the night researching low-glycemic recipes, a new way to exert control over my diabetes. My father was at the table with a legal pad, scribbling down questions for the lawyer he had retained. The pretense of a normal family breakfast felt strained, but necessary. The pharmacy called to confirm my refills were ready. My mother insisted on going to pick them up immediately, even though we had just gotten the hospital supply. She returned with bags of supplies, enough insulin to last for months. We added it all to the lockbox, the growing stockpile a tangible source of reassurance. Dr. Patel's office called to confirm my follow-up. The receptionist mentioned they had blocked out extra time for the appointment, knowing this was more than a routine diabetes checkup. My mother marked it on 3 separate calendars. Her anxiety was manifesting as hypervigilance. I spent the afternoon obsessively checking my blood sugar. Every minor sensation sent a jolt of panic through me. Was I thirsty because my sugar was high, or just dehydrated? Were my hands shaking from low blood sugar or residual trauma? My mother eventually hid my extra test strips, forcing me to stick to my prescribed testing schedule. The detective called with an update. Chloe had made bail but was staying with a friend on the other side of town. The restraining order was officially in effect. He assured us the prosecutor was taking the case very seriously, given the life-threatening nature of her actions. Court dates would be set soon. Dinner was another quiet affair. We had fallen into a new routine, eating in the living room to avoid the memories in the kitchen. My father had started researching home security systems, showing us options on his tablet, motion sensors, cameras, alarm systems, anything to reclaim our sense of safety. The therapist called to schedule our first family session. My mother had interviewed several before choosing one who specialized in medical trauma and family dysfunction. The first appointment was set for the following week, giving us time to process the immediate crisis before diving into the deeper issues. Night fell, bringing the same anxieties with it. I checked the insulin supply twice more, even though I knew nothing had changed. My mother had started a log, noting the location and expiration date of every single vial. My father installed a baby monitor in my room, explaining it was just for now, just until things felt normal again. The second night at home was marginally better. I only woke twice to check my blood sugar and once to check the lockbox. My mother appeared in my doorway during one of the checks, silently confirming that she was still standing watch. We nodded to each other in the darkness, a silent acknowledgement of our new reality. Morning brought the beginnings of a routine. Breakfast, blood sugar check, insulin dose, log everything in the journal. My mother watched, but she didn't hover as much. My father left for work reluctantly, calling twice before noon to check in. The house felt lighter without his nervous energy. I walked into the kitchen for the first time since coming home. The familiar space felt alien, every surface holding an invisible memory. My mother found me standing frozen by the sink, unable to move forward or back. She gently guided me through the motions of making tea, reclaiming the room one small, mundane task at a time. The mail brought a flood of medical bills and insurance statements. My mother sorted through them methodically, creating files for everything related to the incident. She had already started the appeals process for the destroyed insulin, determined to have Chloe's actions documented in every available system. Mrs. Callahan stopped by with more food and a listening ear. She told us stories of her own family's struggles, normalizing our pain without minimizing it. Before she left, she made us promise to use the spare key whenever we needed anything, day or night. Her fierce protectiveness moved my mother to tears again. I spent the afternoon reorganizing my diabetes supplies. We created multiple emergency kits and placed them strategically around the house. Each one contained glucose tabs, a backup meter, and ketone test strips. My father labeled each kit with bright red tape, making them impossible to miss. My dad becomes a security system expert, and my mom becomes a meal prep champion, showing how tragedy makes everyone suddenly pick up new hobbies they never asked for. My follow-up with Dr. Patel showed my physical recovery was progressing well. My blood sugar levels were stabilizing, though they still showed stress-related spikes. She adjusted my insulin ratios again and recommended a continuous glucose monitor for added peace of mind. The technology would alert us to dangerous trends before they became emergencies. On the drive home, my mother finally broke down completely. She pulled the car over, sobbing, for failing to protect me, for enabling Chloe, for ignoring 1,000 small warning signs. I held her hand while she grieved, a shared understanding passing between us that our healing would come in waves. My father had dinner waiting, having left work early to cook. He had made my favorite meal from childhood, a conscious effort to create new, happy memories in our kitchen. We ate at the dining room table for the first time since the incident, reclaiming another piece of our home. The evening brought an exhaustion that felt earned, a strange sense of peace. We had survived another day. My blood sugar had stayed in range. The insulin was safe in its lockbox. These small victories felt monumental. At my mother's suggestion, we watched a mindless, distracting movie together. Bedtime was less fraught with anxiety. I checked my supplies only once, took my blood sugar as normal. My mother kissed my forehead goodnight, a gesture she hadn't made since I was a little girl. My father double-checked the new alarm system before turning in for the night. We were starting to feel safe again. The night passed without incident. I woke only once, more out of habit than need. My blood sugar was fine, my insulin pump humming steadily. I lay in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the house, and felt something inside me begin to unclench. The sun rose on a new day. The trauma would always be a part of our story, woven into the fabric of our family. But we were learning to live around the wound, to build new routines in the spaces it had created. My mother made breakfast without hovering. My father left for work with only one scheduled check-in call. I sat at the kitchen table, in the exact spot where this all began, and gave myself my morning insulin without hesitating. The simple act felt like taking back my power. My mother looked at me from across the table, and for the first time in days, I saw hope in her eyes. Life would go on, changed, but not broken.